Hi, we are at the African American Children's Literature Lecture, and I always, unfortunately, can find new current issues that really make me understand more clearly why it's so important that we have representation, authentic representation of all of our cultures in the United States, and therefore maybe we can prevent some of the awfulness that goes on if, again, we have good multicultural children's literature to help us save the day. So I came across this, I think, about a week and a half ago, and just wanted to share it with you before I started the lecture. Disney recently announced singer Halle Bailey had been cast to play the leading role in a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid. Sounds good, right? While many fans have expressed their excitement at the news, there are some who are arguing the mermaid should have the same appearance she had in the animated 1989 film. That is, white with red hair. So here are some of the arguments as to why this is really what should happen. According to mermaid science, the half-human, half-fish creatures are white because they live underwater and have less melanin, resulting in a lighter skin color, right? Because the sun can't get down into those deep water, so you're going to stay white. Scientific theory here. And this blog goes on to say, you'd think people could get their head around the fact that because mermaids are entirely fiction, they can appear however anyone imagines them. If we can create a human-fish hybrid, then it's not really a stretch to say they can have any skin tone. Makes sense to me. But a huge furor has, of course, erupted because of all of this. Hashtag not my Ariel. So lots of people arguing, and you can look at some of the entries. I have a couple of them, but some of them are like too sordid to print here. But lots of people kind of ranting and raving about it, and other people stirring up the stuff to even make it, more volatile, interesting what we do on social media. So here's some of hashtag not my Ariel. You are the worst choice that Disney has ever made, one person tweeted, using hashtag not my Ariel. You will never be Ariel. Leave the classics alone. If anyone wants princesses from different ethnicities and colors, etc., make new tales. So this is a good one. You're right, she's not your Ariel, somebody else tweeted, because it's someone else's turn to see themselves in The Little Mermaid. You've had yours. Sums it up great, don't you think? Let's give everyone a chance to be reflected and represented in their culture and their society. So that was maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, all the fervor over this, but look at this. I just kind of kept digging more, and I'll just read this. So the debate over a black Ariel is the latest example of how attempts to diversify cultural icons can be, well, mind-blowing, can get people really upset, right? In 2016, Saturday Night Live comedian Leslie Jones weathered racist and sexist online attacks about the release of the all-female Ghostbusters reboot. The abuse led to Jones taking a temporary break from Twitter because they were just so mean. Did you see any of it? It was just wretched. So days before, she has this fabulous movie hitting all the theaters, and she's having to deal with that. Last year, Kelly Marie Tran, the first Asian American actress to have a leading role in a Star Wars movie, deleted all her Instagram posts after facing a relentless online bullying campaign following her appearance in Star Wars: The Last Jedi. So here's what she said. I think this sums up all about racism and about countering some of the things we need to counter with the help of good multicultural children's literature. Their words seem to confirm what growing up as a woman and a person of color already taught me, that I belong in margins and spaces, valid only as a minor character in their lives and stories. So Tran wrote that in an op-ed piece in 2018. That's my preamble for my lecture on African American children's literature. So, African Americans been depicted in general literature for a really long time. They've been represented in literature for decades, hundreds of years. Unfortunately, the depictions in our literature has often been really bad, stereotyped, pejorative, which means like mean and unauthentic. For decades, if a black child was not represented as a Sambo in popular culture, he or she was a pickaninny, which was originally a mocking term for slave children in the antebellum South. I don't know if any of you have heard that phrase before, but I grew up with it. The stereotype conveyed the idea that rural African American children were naive and ignorant and dumb and poor and kind of a joke. So there was a really popular author, Inez Hogan, who wrote a bunch of books about this kid, Nicodemus. Nicodemus. Is that how you say it? So it's this whole storyline about this kid who's just clumsy, lazy, and dim-witted. So just like has exaggerated physical characteristics, crummy clothes, bare feet, doesn't talk very well. And she wrote 12 of those books, and they were really, really popular. I actually have a copy of a book that's really similar to it, and it's really kind of horrific how these children are drawn in an almost animalistic way. Ugh, I shudder. Here's some examples. Nicodemus, or is it Demas? Nicodemus and his grandpappy. So then I was looking over at the children up to 8 will adore this orange and white storybook. A great many young folks are going to be proud to welcome young Nicodemus into the family circle. Has all the lasting qualities of the famous Little Black Sambo, which I'll get to in a second. Nicodemus in his new shoes. I mean, I just think it's really a disrespectful way to portray a certain culture. I'm going to show it to deal which woman what lives in D cave. Not good. Children's book from 1985. 1917, Billy Whiskers in the South. I just dug these all up from the internet. I mean, exaggerated characteristics, right? Really disrespectful. Liza Jane and the Kinkies. Lil Hannibal. They all got overalls on or suspenders, right? This was a 1939 book. It's actually an adult book, a mystery by a very famous racist Agatha Christie, and I covered up the title. This title was around until not that long ago. Then they changed it to 10 Little Indians, and then that had to go. That took a little bit longer. Just quite racist. 1942. Children's book cover. This is really popular, Rupert the Bear. It's in England. It's a huge series, really, really, really popular. Laughs Rupert. This is quite absurd. I cannot understand a word. Still around. They're still in print. This book was put out in 1968, and it's obviously a vintage reprint. Again, I'm blocking out a word. So seriously. So, interesting quote, I think. It wasn't until the early part of the 20th century that non-mainstream works for children began to appear as a reaction to extreme stereotyping. So, not till the early part of the 20th century do we start countering some of these books with multicultural children's books. gross misrepresentation, and skewed stories that were written from a white perspective. So this book, The Story of Little Black Sambo, first published in 1899, and as I said in my intro lecture, not gone out of print, so still in the hands of children, still around. So in the original book, this was one of the original illustrations. That's the mother, Black Mumbo. And we see that stereotypical replication of African American women in lots of things. This is Mammy from Gone with the Wind. Happy Days is here. Aunt Jemima syrup in a bottle that also looked like Black Mumbo and Mammy. So Julius Lester, who's this fabulous children's author, current one, had this to say. He updated Little Black Sambo into Sam and the Tigers, and it's a really cute book. I'll see if I can get it up on the link. Sometimes good multicultural children's books are not on the read aloud. Children's books to read aloud, they're not easily found, right? They're marginalized, kind of pushed aside, so I don't know if I can even find it. I think I've tried, but I'll try again. So it's a great rewrite of Little Black Sambo, and this is what Julius Lester has to say. When I read Little Black Sambo as a child, I had no choice but to identify with him because I am black and so was he. Even as I sit here and write, the feelings of shame, embarrassment, and hurt come back. And there was a bit of confusion because I liked the story, and I especially liked all those pancakes. But the illustrations exaggerated the racial features society has made it clear to me represented my racial inferiority. The black skin, the eyes shining white, the red protruding lips. I did not feel good about myself as a black child looking at those pictures. Totally sums it up, right? That we have these books in the hands of children, in the hands of teachers, and this is what it does to children. Julius Lester explains that he writes now for black children. I must address myself to blacks to write books that hopefully will give black children the strength and pride that have been deliberately kept from them. It will be a long time before the massive whites look upon black children as blacks and as individuals. I do not exist in this country as an individual. I am black. Which just reminds me of that whole wonderful disability article that I keep raving about, just like me, just like you. Because I just wrote that announcement talking about it, and this kind of reflects is that he's writing for black children so that he can express the unique experiences of being a black child in a country that does not see black children, right? So interesting. So Lester follows a big old history of African American writers who were and are determined to ensure that African American children are indeed robustly reflected in the literature. I love African American children's literature because I think they've done the best job of doing this, and there's a variety of reasons for that and a variety of reasons why other cultures haven't been able to do it as wonderfully, and which I will be talking about. We must give our own story to the world. Again, the unique story of being black in a racist country, right? So this really smart guy way back, W.E.B. Du Bois, was concerned that there wasn't any books reflecting a positive African American experience for children. There weren't those children's books out, right? Because we saw some of the racist books that were around, and he was one of the first intellects that thought, okay, we got to do something about this. So because all the children's literature was done by white authors, and so it came from a white perspective. Not saying that all white authors were racist at the time, but it still came from a perspective that didn't necessarily embrace African American children. So he did this really cool thing. He started a magazine, and you subscribed to it. And it was called the Brownies Their Book, and there's all this really cool stuff in it, cute things. And it came out, I'm not sure how many, I think it came out once a month. So it was a really big endeavor. And it was well received, but the problem was that it didn't get enough subscribers. So they just did, not after 24 issues. It went away, and it was cool. It had all these poems and all this stuff written by African American authors, and just kind of some highbrow stuff and fun stuff, and reactions from African American children. And it was just like, oh wow, just this world, right? This place that you could just feel connected to. So too bad on that. So that kind of started a wave of continuing to try to represent the African American experience in children's literature, and so lots of other individuals followed suit. This guy Woodson, he was really interested in making sure that there were positive renditions of the experience of being African American in the U.S., and so he really pushed for that. And one of the things they did is they got published well-known African-American adult writers, right? Like Langston Hughes and other people that were doing stuff. They said, write some children's books too, because we could break in. Because that was before, you could just publish anything you wanted on the internet, right? This is when there was big publishing houses, so you couldn't break into it. So they did some really ingenious things to get representation of African-American experience in children's books. It's really cool. Jupiter is groaning because she's saying, it's 2 o'clock and I still haven't gone for a walk. Okay, and then another really interesting crusader, Augusta Baker. She worked for the library in Harlem, and it was an area populated by African American individuals, and she just started this new push to make sure that there was good images, positive images for African American children to look at, to see. Amazing things. So this is one of those quotes that I'm going to say about 5 times or 17 million times in this lecture, because I think it's just a very interesting one, and I think that African American children's literature has gotten so great because of this whole notion. It says, because literature reflects the struggles, experiences, and aspirations of its creators, it is not surprising that African American children's literature has developed distinct characteristics and has focused to a large extent on affirming African American life, culture, and history. Big stuff, right? So authentic literature was written by in-culture people, and in this case African Americans, then it's going to reflect their perspective as to how African Americans came up in our society, right? So because of that, we've got some great stories out there. This is all about Rosa Parks, right? And how back in the 40s and 50s and before that African American individuals were allowed to get on the bus and pay their fare, but they had to go to the back of the bus to sit, and if white people did not have a seat, they had to get up and stand so that white people could have their seats. So this was an interesting start to the civil rights movement, was Rosa Parks deciding, I'm tired, I've worked all day, I'm not gonna get up. And so that was, again, an interesting part of history that is reflected in a developmentally appropriate way. It's not going to be talking about all the crazy stuff, right? But like if the bus could talk, where Rosa Parks, that bus could say what was happening there, that would be pretty exciting. So it's awesome. Faith Ringgold, fabulous illustrator, just amazing. So perfect example of lifting up, affirming the experience of African Americans. So again, this is an interesting thing that makes African American children's literature so fabulous in my eyes. Black children's literature cannot just be classified as an aesthetic literary work, but has to be looked on as a literary vehicle in understanding what went on, right? The historical, political, spiritual, and sociological experiences of being Black in the United States for children. So all the turmoil, all the history of being Black in the United States from slavery on up has been portrayed in beautiful and, again, emotionally, socially, developmentally appropriate ways in children's books. It's been amazing. African Americans all share the experience of being members of a society in which race matters more than it should, right? So we need to have lots of books that counter that counter what is considered beautiful, that counters some of the experiences that we're here and we belong here too. So there's lots of children's books that talk about that. So again, that quote, themes such as the effects of racism, information about the institution of slavery, struggles for equality and racial uplift, effects of dominant beauty standards, questions of identity, and contributions of African Americans are common across African American children's literature. So effects of racism, that was like, you know, Rosa Parks on the bus, right? Struggles for equality and racial uplift, lots of books of that. Dominant beauty standards, what is beautiful? Black is beautiful. Questions of identity, contributions of African Americans. Big stuff. So themes such as the effects of racism, this was the story of Ruby Bridges. It didn't happen when I was growing up, didn't hear much about it. I don't know if you were schooled in the U.S., have you heard much about Ruby Bridges? She was the first African-American child to attend an all-white elementary school in 1960, because that was Brown versus the Board of Education saying we have to integrate schools. You know, a lot of people said, no way, we're not doing it. Bus kids, you know, poor kids can stay in one neighborhood and they're just buzz, blah, blah, blah. So it finally, after it was passed that you cannot segregate, because it didn't mean you would get equal education unless you integrated. Ruby Bridges was the first kid to be put to the test of going into an all-white school. She had to be escorted by National Guards because of the fervor about this little 6-year-old entering into an all-white school. That's some of the crowd there. All I want for Christmas is a clean white school. Those are mothers. Shame on you. There's Ruby. Norman Rockwell, iconic Americana painter, immortalized this whole thing. So those are the U.S. Marshals escorting Ruby Bridges to class while people throw stuff at her. And there's the adult Ruby Bridges with our President Obama having that painting hung up in the White House. That would be cool to go see. So another part of that quote, struggles for equality and racial uplift. This is Langston Hughes did a whole thing, I Too Am America. Oh, let me tell you, I have something about Ruby Bridges on the link. I have the book, and then I have a little bit, I think I have something about the history of the actual Ruby Bridges. And I have this, I Too Am America, is part of the poem, and I actually took it from Denzel Washington is doing it in the movie. So check that out. But so, again, conveying the idea that I'm here too, and I'm also an American, and like deal with it. So his poem, I too sing America, I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. So, information about the institution of slavery, a great children's book, Henry's Freedom Box, based on a true story. So I have the video and the link, and it's just a great quick story. So check that one out. But again, it's a way to talk about slavery to a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, right? And do it in a way that conveys enough information, right? And how it's not a great thing, but isn't going to like punch you in the nose about it. It's going to give it to you in a way that's appropriate for your age. Beautiful stuff. So again, that quote, that these are all important issues that are conveyed wonderfully in African American children's literature. So I think that when we talk about some of the issues, the identity of beauty, the standards of beauty was something from that quote, how we have conveyed what is considered to be beautiful, and how we counter the standard of beauty in African American children's literature. So I'll just let you read this. You know, I forgot to add in here that just happened is, where was it? A school district has finally accepted African American hairstyles. There's something going on. Oh, I don't know what it is. I'll find it. I'll find it and add it. It was just something that came out pretty recently in the last couple weeks. I'll get it. So the idea of African American hair not being beautiful enough because it's not the dominant culture beauty. It's interesting how many children's books have been written to counter that notion. And it's a very real notion. This is Melissa Harris Perry, a number of years ago when she was on MSNBC. She countered what happened to African American girl at a school, and because of how her hair, how she wore her hair. And that was at least 10 years ago, I believe. And I can cite things as recently as a half a year ago, and I'm sure if I dug it up, which I haven't lately, if I did research right now, I could cite examples of African American girls getting kicked out of school or not being allowed to have their photo taken because of their natural hair. So it's a real issue, and it continues to be a real issue. And there's easily, from my knowledge, at least 12 really fabulous children's books written about African American children's hair and the beauty of it. And so you think, why do we need all those? Because we need them because of our racist attitudes as to what is considered beautiful and not beautiful, and kicking girls out of school with hair that is not considered appropriate. So this says everything, right, in terms of representation, reflecting and connecting to someone who's in your society. I mean, really, right? Can you imagine? It makes me want to cry every time I see it. So again, effects of dominant beauty standards. Great books out there to counter the effects of what it means to be beautiful in our society. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. This is a really cute short video that was on Sesame Street, again to counter those dominant effects of what is beautiful. So if you don't watch anything in those links, just watch this one. I know it's going to put a smile on most of your faces. I love my hair. And she has a great voice, so watch it. So then questions of identity, right? Of like, who am I, and am I good enough? And, you know, just really great books out there. And they've done a fabulous African American canon of literature for children has done a fabulous job of highlighting their heroes. Lots of things about different important leaders in the community, in the culture. This is a really great story about Sojourner Truth. So this quote again, I kind of keep throwing in a few of the same ones, like, because literature reflects struggles, experiences, aspirations of its creators. Not surprising about the wide range of topics that are discussed in African American children's literature. It's really great stuff. And so we got to continue the great stuff, right? Because we have a lot to counter relative to the African American experience as we go from people foaming at the mouth from having a African American Ariel to everything else in the news. Just pick a topic. I try not to get too incendiary in here. I think I said that word right. It's about too lit up on fire. I don't want to get everyone riled up too much, but it's pretty easy to look at ongoing news and seeing how we need to counter some of what's going on with the African American culture, or a lot of what's going on, right? Got to have some good positive messages. And how do we do that? Change the message, right? Reflect cultures respectfully and appropriately so that people, and especially kids of that culture, sees themselves and sees others in the world like themselves, and sees, just like I was talking about that whole disability thing, that doesn't just lump everyone together, sees the struggles that African American culture has endured based on all sorts of reasons, right? To see those things too, and that it doesn't just disappear. That whole colorblind thing, doesn't disappear. Some good books. This is a chapter book for about a third grader or fourth grader. It's a trilogy too, so that's kind of fun. She has done some fun things in this. Illustrated by Brian Pinkney. There's a couple of Pinkneys, I think a sister to it. Oh my gosh, they do the best illustrating. So cool. So this is just the end video for the final exam. And I always forget to throw in a question about what should be on that in terms of the lecture. Whew. So I just have to keep going back to, I think what should be on the exam should be something about what are some of the ways some of the ways that African American authors have addressed pertinent or important aspects of their culture in children's books. So children's books. That's going to be good. You've got some ideas. You saw a bunch of them. So what are some of the ways that African American authors have addressed important aspects of their culture in children's books? Okay, something like that. But anyway, Ernestine Johnson, she does, the spoken word or poetry. So catch that. It's just a fun experience. So do catch that at the end of the Canvas thingy bops for this week. Okay? That's it. I kept it kind of pretty short for my most exciting, favoritist canon of literature just because of everything they've done. So let me check the temperature. And do I need to... Okay, it's 66, partly cloudy on Bainbridge Island today is it one day before the first man on the moon? So it's July 19th. Okay, thanks for listening, and if you need anything, let me know, and I will talk to you soon.